How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Hey, hey, hey. I'm Joe. And this is...
I am Dr. Joe. Yeah, what do you think?
I am
Dr. Joe. I'm Joe.
I am what I am.
I am. But the I am approach, that's really...
So what do you think, listener?
You know,
we're iterating through another name change. The other one never really stuck.
That me and Dr. Joe? Yeah. I mean, it works, but it wasn't like, and the Dr. Joe Show, come on, I mean, there's so many of them. And so what do you guys think? I am Dr. Joe because my whole stuff is the I am approach. Right?
Stuff.
That's my stuff.
Your shtick.
The I am approach that I created back in 1982. It was IMAX at the time. We called it the IMAX. But when I went to publish the first book, it wasn't my first, it was actually my third book. And this publishing house said, if we say it's IMAX approach, we could get sued by the IMAX theater, even though my name predated them, but I didn't copyright it. What did I know? But
intellectual property.
But, we don't talk about the song, the theme song, but how can we make the world better? When Sophie introduces the show, the I am approach, how can we make the world better? That is part of what we're trying to do. And the show that preceded us, those folks on Veterans Voice, they are making the world better.
Agreed.
By continuing the sacrifice as our soldiers, the people who are standing up literally for our country. So I wanted to thank them again, and again apologize publicly for what we did, I think innocently in many ways, back in the 70s when folks came back from the Vietnam Wars. And they were shouted at and told that they were bad people. That did not make the world better.
No. That must have been a very, very confusing time to be alive.
Yeah. And I was alive. And that was when Zoom was also happening. It was 1972, when all of this stuff was happening. It's late 60s, people coming back. The 70s, it was continuing. We had all sorts of things. But
these were young kids.
These were young
weren't
kids.
Politicians.
No.
These weren't leaders of nations.
No.
And these were young kids.
Doing their job.
Well.
And then being maligned for it by those. But again.
But what was that? Was that ignorance? What?
It was it was an I am. So again, the idea was the best they could do. Why? Because there was this idea that war was bad, and there's no question. War is not good. War is bad. But the people who are doing the service and putting their lives at risk, they are not bad. It's not just following orders, right? Because that can be a terrible excuse. We've heard that. We heard that from some very evil people as well in World War II. I was just following orders.
Right.
This is not the same. This is saying I'm going to leave my home, go to a foreign country that we feel is somehow threatening to us. Now, from an I am point of view, again, that's the best we can do. But when we can apply the I am approach to the politics of that and say, wait a second, what is the fight really about here?
Right.
What is that fight about? Is it really the only way that you can feel valuable is to try to take somebody else's value? Is that the only way?
And you're not willing to go in there and do it. You're going to send young kids to go do it for you.
Yes.
Come on, people.
Yep. That's right. Not to say that there weren't remarkable leaders, colonels, generals, people there who were in the country fighting the battles as well.
They're not the reason that they're in the war either.
They are not the reason they're in the war. That's right.
It's the politicians and the leaders of the nations who then get to outsource the actual fighting to others within their country.
Yep.
So it was misdirected anger.
Yes.
That the youth, well, was it mostly the youth? It was the hippie generation, right? The contrarian generation that focused incorrectly on the soldier.
Yeah.
Versus the authorities, or
and the most convenient target, however.
Right, because they were right there.
Right there. And accessible and vulnerable.
Right.
And I think in retrospect, that also adds to the tragedy, was these folks were already traumatized.
Right.
And then to come home, and it's not home anymore.
You're
anyway,
not being welcomed home for sure.
So how can we make the world better? Let's acknowledge that happened. Let's acknowledge that the people who are offering us their service now are remarkable. But let's also acknowledge that perhaps there's another way we can do this without having to go to war.
Mm.
And I believe there is. But you have to understand why people feel so threatened, or why they feel so vulnerable, or why they feel that somebody else who has more value is somehow more powerful. We all have the same value. We're humans. But that's the I am approach. We've got a ringer. Somebody calling in, or Larry, was that just my imagination?
So shall we solve a problem tonight? Shall we solve one of the world's problems?
Wait,
let's tackle housing. Shall we? So shall we solve the housing crisis?
I do want to solve it, but we do have Greg from the Veterans Voice Show,
cool.
who's
Greg
calling.
Rosso.
Greg, come on out.
Yes. Hey, good afternoon. I'm sorry to call in, but I wanted to say that thanks for continuing the discussion, and a big point that should be mentioned is that the average age of the soldier during World War II was 26, 27, or 28. The average age of the soldier on the Vietnam Wall, unfortunately, is 18 and a half or 19.
Oh, my goodness.
So they took the
It's
babies
amazing.
of the babies and sent them over there. And one thing that I think isn't discussed enough, that it was the first war that there was no battle lines. There was no front line. There was no safety. You were on edge from minute to minute, and it was the first time, and now terrorism is everywhere. It was the first time our soldiers were affected by terrorism to that effect, and PTS was one of the sad results.
Post-traumatic stress, PTS.
Yes.
Yeah. I was not aware of that detail, that there were no sort of boundaries in that way.
Yeah, it was the first unconventional war.
Yeah.
That we fought.
There was always, and no matter in the front lines during World War II, the soldiers would be in battle for a week or 2 weeks, and then they'd go back 10 or 12 miles where there was safety, and they could rest and relax and just kick back a little bit. But there was no such safety over there, and there's none in that part of the world now. So unfortunately, we just got to make the best of what we can.
Well, Greg, it's your shows also, Veterans Voice, that is acknowledging the incredible contribution that our veterans have done for our country. So I want to thank you also, and thanks so much for pulling me into your show tonight just spontaneously. I really enjoyed it. So
well, we did too, and because there's much to be learned from both sides of this.
Absolutely,
you're making tremendous impact, Greg.
You are,
you and your team.
And thank you, Justin and Tom. Appreciate it.
All right, you guys have a great night.
Okay,
and,
thanks, Greg.
Keep it up, buddies. Okay, good night.
Okay, bye.
And they did their food drive today too.
Tell me about that.
So once a month they do a food drive, and it's spectacular. I saw them setting up this morning, and last month, the line was out on 139 and no questions asked. They put the food in the trunk and drive through, and it's special. Those guys are unbelievable.
They really are.
Inspiring.
Yeah. And it's an honor to follow them.
Yeah. Amen.
In our show. But they're doing so much for so many.
So should we solve housing? Let's do it.
I would really like to solve housing. I think there's room for that, but we also want to get that there's room for solving housing. But I want to give room to our sponsors. So we'll hear from their house of our sponsors, and we'll be right back with what is it?
I am Dr. Joe.
Hey folks, thank you for listening to the Dr. Joe Show. We've been investigating whether or not we want to bring sponsors into our podcast. What are your thoughts? Do you know somebody who might be a good partner with the Dr. Joe Show, who may want to align their product or service with the Dr. Joe Show? Think about it.
And we're back. Right here, live in studio, Broadcast House, WATD 95.9, with I am Dr. Joe.
I am Dr. Joe.
I am
Dr.
Joe.
I am Dr. Joe, the I am approach.
What do you think, folks? Yeah. I am Dr. Joe.
I am Dr. Joe.
We're all Dr. Joe.
Yeah, well, we're all doing
aspiring
the best we can.
To be Dr. Joe.
Well, I know about that. But we're all at our I am. We are doing the best we can at every moment in time.
Aspiring to follow the I am.
And we are going to be talking tonight about housing.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm really interested in it because
Well, what are we going to do? It's such a big problem, and everyone talks about the problem.
Yeah.
You know? So there's low interest rates, so nobody wants to sell. There's no transfer of wealth from one generation to the other generation. Where's the new home buyers? Well, they can't afford it because of the student loans. Well, the people aren't selling their houses because they have low interest rates. What do we do? Construction costs are too big. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And there's very few people putting out solutions. So I thought tonight we'd explore it through the I am.
Yes.
And see if we can solve it.
Why not?
I don't know.
Well, why not? So let's go through the I am then. So what is the domain? What are the domains that we're talking about in particular with solving the housing crisis?
Well, social domain. Well, home domain clearly. Right?
Home domain clearly.
Because we need a home.
We need a home. It's one of the primary things. Right. Food, shelter is the second thing, and then the ability to mate is third. So shelter is huge. It's safety. It's protection, but it's also part of that social domain.
Social, neighbors.
Yeah, neighbors, community.
Friends, community.
And there's an identification then through the I see domain, right? How do I see myself? How do I think other people see me? How do people see my neighborhood?
Am I supposed to live there?
Am I supposed to?
Is this my people?
Right.
Who's moving in?
Who's moving in?
Look who's coming to dinner.
Right, which will activate your biological domain. Am I now back in my fight, flight, freeze mode? Or am I in that social oxytocin, not OxyContin, that oxytocin mode where we are feeling more happiness because we feel safer, because we have a larger community to protect us. So what is going on with housing?
So there's a lot. So our governor, Maura Healey, is very focused on this as something that she hopes to solve. She ran her campaign on it. She brought in some amazing people. The former mayor of Salem is on her team, and I saw her speak at the South Shore Chamber, and her name is slipping. But I saw her speak at the South Shore Chamber event on housing, and man, was she impressive. And the team is very focused on solving this statewide. And one of the things they did is they pushed through a law that was originally brought forth when Charlie Baker was governor. It's the MBTA zoning. And if your community is serviced by the MBTA or in its adjacent community, then they were mandating that you as a community, choose a zone that will allow for much more dense housing opportunities.
Let me understand that. So,
Yeah.
so if we have an MBTA station, which gives us access to all sorts of places we don't have to drive,
Correct.
there's a price for that?
Yes.
And the price is we need to create more housing.
Right. We're service. I think the idea behind it was the state is saying we're helping your community by servicing commuters in and out of the big city or what have you, giving you better access to public services. We want you to share this burden of not enough housing. So we want you to help us solve this in your community. We want to spread out the density of, communities to eliminate restrictive or what would be deemed exclusive zoning, right? So 1 acre zone is what a lot of communities have. So they have a residential zone, which requires a certain amount of frontage on your street and a certain amount of square footage on your lot. And 1 acre.
So that's 1 acre for your house. So
For your house.
So your house, that's the 1 acre zone. Okay. Just
So with the MBTA, the only word I can choose here is mandate, right? It's a mandate, and that's where when we were at town meeting, if you recall, people were very upset that the state was forcing their community to do something, right? So one of the pieces of the zoning is you have to avail 15 units per acre. So going from a 1 home per acre to 15 homes per acre it's a big change.
And there's only one way you can really do that, which is to build some sort of housing complex. I don't know why they call it complex, because that has a whole other meaning in psychiatry.
It's complicated.
Right.
There are creative housing opportunities. I personally don't like the economically efficient, square, boring, institutional rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I lived in buildings like that. I didn't really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why I wanted to talk with you about this, is like, what are some of these potential solutions to make everybody happy? Or, as we've referred to in the legal profession, a good settlement is when both parties are equally unhappy. However, how do you make it so, the community embraces the folks moving in? Those folks moving in move in to something they can be really proud of, right? So density has been the real conversation, and 1 acre zoning is under fire right now in a big way because it's deemed exclusive. It's, unaffordable for a lot of people, because the more you chop up land, the more efficient it is, the more cost effective it becomes, and more affordable. One of the conversations I like to have about housing, because it is a really complicated conversation and it spreads in so many different ways. However, if we're able to take the word affordable out of the dialogue, right? Take out 40B, right? People don't really understand what 40B is. It's a section within the Mass General Laws that allows for certain exemptions around zoning if you follow and you comply with certain things that the state would like to help open up opportunities for people to be able to afford common sense housing. And 40B it triggers so many people, and it's fascinating because if some of those people understood what some of these communities look like, they may change their opinion on what is upsetting, right? So removing 40B from the conversation, removing affordable housing from the conversation, replacing those words with common sense housing or something like that. I've heard some really good examples. Common sense is what I always end up defaulting to, because what are we doing, right? Like, the cost of housing has become completely unaffordable.
Right. So to go back, I think you said that the state has, it wasn't even a problem. It was a word that you used. It was pretty dark. And that
Mandate?
Well, the mandate was what we had to do about it. But there was this real, this problem, this sense that we have this density and we have too many people. And if you have access from your suburban or urban or rural town to our city because we paid for MBTA, you owe us. As opposed to, so that right away, that optic is going to create,
which is what upsets. It gets the backup, right?
As opposed to, we are asking you to share your access with others so that they too can use the MBTA and come into our city and help all of us. Because when people are working, when they're contributing, that's helping the economy of our entire state. Am I missing something here? Or?
No. And
so, in other words, we need to change the optics, and that will then change the biological domain response.
There's definitely a communication breakdown that's happening.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of it feels like, you can't tell me what to do, Mom.
Right.
You know, and that triggers the limbic responses.
Right. As opposed to, the association I have is what I tell parents. Have your kids have a contribution instead of a chore.
Right.
Right? You're contributing to the household means you have value. A chore means, here's a power differential. I'm in charge of you. I tell you what to do. And that brain that is being told what to do feels devalued because all of a sudden they've lost their autonomy. They're in a chore. I wonder whether that's part of it. There's a mandate.
I think it's a lot of it.
Right. But the problem is, because of the history of the way people help each other or don't, is that not why it's become a mandate? Because people just weren't doing it voluntarily?
I would imagine that's exactly why.
So we probably need to take a look at that
Yeah.
as well. What is that about that not in my backyard? Because that's really part of what we're talking about. And that's not an easy subject to talk about because people will get defensive saying, hey, it's my backyard,
But it's not your land.
Food, shelter, the ability to reproduce. What happens when you share your shelter? Does it mean you have less food? And does it mean you now have competition about reproducing? Those are some of the biological triggers that'll happen. We're lucky enough to have sponsors who are not biologically triggering, but are absolutely contributing, and they are going to make your household better. Let's hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back with I Am
Dr. Joe. Hey, folks, welcome back. So any thoughts? Do you listen to other podcasts? Do you see how they do the sponsors? Is there a way that they're utilizing sponsors that you enjoy or you don't enjoy? I listen to SmartList, and I really enjoy how the co-hosts share the voiceover for the product or service. It's really funny for the most part, but it's unique. It's them really endorsing. Does that work? What do you think?
Hi, Larry. Hi, listener.
Hi, Larry. Hi, listener.
We're back. WATD 95.9. Me, Mark Stiles, and
I am Dr. Joe.
I love it. I'm
It's
going to
not
get
bad.
used to it. I like
We're
it.
going to get there.
Yeah. NIMBY. We were talking about NIMBY. Do you want to share what a NIMBY is?
Yeah, not in my backyard.
There's another acronym that's being tossed around in this genre. It's CAVE people.
Well, what's that?
Citizens Against Virtually Everything.
Whoa.
So those folks are there too. Like, I don't want anything to change.
Okay, so is the analogy purposeful? The caveman mentality?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good one.
It is a good one.
What's it again?
Citizens against virtually everything.
Oh, my gosh.
Cave people.
Wow.
And
it's an
they're
IM.
real, right? They don't want anything to change. Status quo. Don't change anything. And who moved my cheese?
Yeah. Do you think is that rigidity really based on insecurity, that they feel that, if there's a change, my whole world basically
that's an interesting question.
Disappears?
It's a really interesting question. I don't know. I mean, is it a deep-rooted fear?
Mm-hmm. Of change, right?
Yeah.
Because I know there's a difference between something that's familiar and comfortable, but they both can be at the same time. So something that is familiar is really comfortable. I can predict what's going to happen. I know exactly what the stores are. I know all this stuff. Do not change that, because I will go limbic, and then I have to manage my uncertainty.
So is that sometimes confused with stubbornness, though, right? So I don't want that to change. It's not that I'm afraid of anything, but I like it exactly the way it is.
Right. And I think if you go deeper, why?
Right.
Why do you like exactly?
Ultimately, the core is the fear, the anxiety that they're going to lose something by something changing, right?
And the reframe is, what's your favorite food?
Steak.
But did you know that before you tried it?
Right.
That's how you manage somebody's fear of change, is you reframe it. You don't know, but what's your favorite food? You would never have known that was favorite food if you didn't try it.
Right.
You may try it and it's not your favorite food, but at least you've tried it, as opposed to being stuck in the rigidity of, I don't want anything to change ever. What size shoe do you wear? Well, probably not the same size shoe that you wore when you were a kid.
Yeah.
That changed.
Yeah.
And now you can continue to walk. So.
And the weather's changing, and things are changing, the clocks are changing, things are changing.
Right.
How do you stop it?
And so somebody may say, well, this I don't need to change.
Yeah.
And again, that's where, so again, going back to the I am, it's an I am, right? Your biological domain has been activated because you fear that you will be seen differently because your home or social domain has now changed. Keep it frontal, don't go limbic. There's opportunities here. The opportunity to help someone. This is what, Greg and his team were talking about earlier. This amazing feeling you get when you help someone, as opposed to the anxiety of trying to keep them out. So back to the NIMBY.
So it's interesting to think about the NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard, but maybe when your house was being built, right? That person who was building your house faced resistance from another neighbor because they had a 10-acre farm, and now there was going to be a house near their farm. And wow, it appeared to have worked out, right? Your neighborhood assimilated and became part of the fabric. And now there's a change because there's something else that could potentially be developed near your home.
So could I use the word evolved instead of assimilate? Because assimilate sounds like something out of Star Trek, where you're the Borg and we're going to assimilate you, and you will lose your identity because you've now been assimilated.
Well, I think assimilating. I'm going to clap back with you here. I think assimilate is the word, because if that development, for lack of a better term, was objected to and battled for and then put into place, it the contents of that development and the people therein assimilated and melded into that area, and it was fine. Right? It's America. It's the melting pot. It's where people assimilate.
But it's now a different community.
It is.
Which evolved.
But every time someone moves out of a house and then another one moves in, it's a different neighborhood.
Yes. And again, by reframing it that way, say you're already used to this.
Right.
It's already happened. On occasion, you may get a neighbor that you didn't like as much, but in essence, that's part of what we do in our social domain. We assimilate, we evolve, we adapt, and then we create a new I see. This is now how my community is seen.
Right.
And that's going to have an effect on your biological domain and your home domain. So the NIMBY part is fascinating because it's basically saying, you're not part of my group. I do not want you as part of my group.
I don't even know who you are, and I don't want you.
Right. I don't even know who you are, and I don't want you.
Because I don't want to know you.
Yeah. And what's my phrase for that? Every friend was once a stranger.
Amen.
Right?
Love that.
Every friend was once a stranger. So we have an opportunity here. My understanding is that Mayor Wu in Boston is doing something with, because post-COVID, weren't there a lot of business buildings that
They have attempted to figure that out. So the inside baseball on converting an office building to a residential building is not cost effective.
Really?
Every developer that I've spoken with said it would be more cost effective to knock the building down and build new buildings because of how everything is structured. Now,
does that mean like plumbing and stuff like that?
All of it,
because you only have one bathroom per floor instead of one bathroom for every apartment. Oh, that's interesting.
And the way they're designed, and there was conversations where people were talking about cut out the middle of the building, creates like an atrium,
like a quad,
and then retrofit. But it becomes more expensive to actually retrofit than to raze, R-A-Z-E, knock it down and rebuild something brand new. So that's why it hasn't been happening. Now there's been talks of like we're going to help support through grants and this and that the ability for developers to do that.
So wait, let me just understand that. So it's going to cost more to change the plumbing in a building and the electricity in the building?
You're redesigning the whole inside of it. So you're taking the envelope of the building and you're only leaving that.
Yeah.
And you're going inside the building and you're rearranging everything. Picture it like Legos or something.
Yeah.
You're inside and you have to redesign everything. To do that is not easy to do. What is easier, from what I'm told, knock it down and start over again. Doesn't sound logical until you really kind of think about the cost of construction and the difficulties associated with getting in and doing the things that need to be done, and versus clean slate, right? And open canvas to recreate on.
So I'm just curious. I don't expect you to know the answer, but who did those numbers? I mean,
developers. People would have done it. They would have done it by now. In droves, if it made sense. Think about it, because these commercial landlords are hanging on by their fingertips, and they have been for a very long time, like COVID long. And banks are trying to figure out, what do we do? The values of the properties are plummeting. Plummeting below the value of the mortgages that they owe money on. And, nobody's really blinked yet. Right. So it's when the first few of these start to go onto the market, which really hasn't happened. And it's fascinating to me because the occupancy rates are so low. They're not making money.
These are the office buildings.
As an office building. Correct. And it's all post-COVID stuff. Like, this is a COVID nightmare when people, aren't returning to the office and realizing we don't need all this office space. And all of a sudden, there's this surplus in office space, and what do you do with it? Well, let's turn it to housing. Well, that doesn't work. Now what?
What about
And maybe it does work when you're selling it for pennies on the dollar, right? Because ultimately that's what starts to happen is what else can we do with this building? Because now it might simply be land with a structure that we have to get rid of, start over.
That's interesting. I mean, I wonder whether they could make them all like residential psychiatric hospitals and things, because
probably,
because you don't need to have.
I knew we were going to solve something. I knew it.
I'm serious, because
I am too. That's an interesting, statement right there.
Because we don't have enough beds, and the amount of money that we're spending housing people who need help in emergency rooms is ridiculous. I mean, there's a lot of money going into that, because we've closed down so many of our inpatient psychiatric hospitals.
That's really interesting.
So why not maybe do that? Because
I love it.
Because we don't need to have. I mean, you still need bathrooms, but you don't. Not every room needs a bathroom.
But a common bathroom.
But
right?
a common bathroom,
right.
Exactly. But you could certainly make each. I mean, I'm
offices
I'm
into
picturing
residentials.
Right. I'm picturing the sort of cubicle office space.
Turn it to more of a hospital floor.
Because it probably doesn't got that much money to put up walls.
No, you could retrofit to a hospital floor relatively easily, I would think.
You see, that would be really interesting.
Very interesting.
Because we could really help so many people so quickly and get them off the street as well.
Yes, exactly. That's interesting.
So would that then, people freak out about that? I don't want psych and mental health and addiction people in my backyard, and I don't want the people
you already
who
have
are
an office
on
building in your
CAS
backyard
and mass in my building.
Yeah, so that's going to happen regardless, right?
Yeah.
Now, that being said, you already have an office building in your backyard, so you're not really living in a, typical residential neighborhood at that point.
That would be so cool.
I think that's
We
totally.
should pilot that.
I think it's doable. I do. So then there are other ways of helping to solve the housing crisis, right?
And I want to hear every one of those things. But the first thing I want to do is solve some of our sponsors' crises. Hopefully they don't have any. But let's hear from them. And then we're going to come back with I Am Dr. Joe and me and Mark Stiles. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. And again, we're super grateful for you listening to the Dr. Joe Show. If you have anyone that you think might be a good sponsor, shoot us an email at drjoepodcast@gmail.com. DRJOE podcast@gmail.com. Give us your thoughts about the show, too. We're wondering, are we talking to the trees, or are people really gaining value in this? Please let us know. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Hello, Larry. Hello, listener. We are back right here on WATD. It's me and
I am Dr. Joe.
and we were just we've been talking about the housing solutions.
Yeah.
Because we're sick of hearing about all of the problems, and we were talking about the new ADU laws, right? The accessory dwelling unit, where the in-laws, the granny pads, what have you. And I was talking with a friend today, and she was like, these homes with apartments over the garages is not going to solve the housing crisis. And I said, I know, but it's a step in the right direction, right? It's giving somebody great housing in a great community for a great price.
So it's giving
it's mitigating some expenses for the homeowner.
So it's giving you room for creative process.
Yeah.
A room.
Yeah, I heard you.
But it is interesting, because wasn't it like really hard? Weren't the laws
it made
like
it
really
challenging
hard to
because
build
a lot
in-law
of
apartment?
communities did not like them because they felt it was a slippery slope towards multifamily.
Oh.
So is it an in-law? Do they need to be related? What are you doing? Or is it a two-family and you're simply going to rent it out and Airbnb it and capitalize on it and create traffic and ruin our neighborhood? So there was a lot of resistance with a lot of communities. Many communities were forward thinking and thought these are great. This is a great idea to have people the ability to have, ability to house other people, whether it's family or otherwise. A lot of the towns used to have requirements that it had to be blood relatives, or there were certain restrictions to it. But now the state has, as part of their housing solutions, have mandated, not a great word again, but mandated across the board that people can, by right, have their own second dwelling on their property.
So when you say it's a mandate, does that imply that a town may have been against it, but the state says, we don't care that you're against
Correct.
it. Your citizen in that town has the right to do it, no matter what you think.
Yeah, it's preemption.
That's what the mandate
is
about. So that's also interesting. I mean,
and the community can push back, and that's what's happening with many communities with respect to the MBTA zoning that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Is they're pushing back, and they're saying, no, what you're doing is unconstitutional. You can't do us. We have a local rule. We're allowed to govern our own communities, and you can't tell us what we have to do. And they say, okay, well, we'll just stop funding you with any of the funds that we typically will share with you. We'll just not fund you.
Aren't there some lawsuits going on from
There are plenty of lawsuits.
Towns?
Yeah.
Are we is Marshfield going to get?
We were in it.
Yeah.
And you were at town hall with me, sitting
remember.
in the section of people who were very much against it and watching their reaction to it. And they're in litigation with the state because of the fact that they've chosen not to comply with the mandate.
So I know that we're in Marshfield. So is NIMBY not in Marshfield's backyard?
Right? Or are we a bunch of cave people?
Yeah. I mean, clearly it was not unanimous, but enough of a majority. I wonder whether if we or others had known that was going and that they'd stacked.
Well, that's I mean that is
with other voters.
Well, that's the huge conversation around the town meeting structure of government, right? There's only a certain amount of people that go to town meeting.
Yeah.
There is a large group of people who probably had no idea what was happening and weren't there to vote or have an understanding of, what is hearing both sides of it.
And that gets into, a sort of associated question and associated topic, which is we don't have a local newspaper anymore. We used to have local newspapers that would say town meeting is coming, and pretty much everybody in town was getting the local newspaper. There isn't a resource now unless you make the effort to go online, and even then.
Well, there's the Facebook forums, which are interesting.
Right.
Community journalists.
But, having been involved in 2 overrides, we were able to get people to town.
But again,
meeting.
it's the flip side of it, right? You gained momentum. You organically grew a grassroots campaign towards something that made sense.
For the town.
And you were able to gather enough people to support it to then pack the vote. I mean, I remember some of those situations where, we can't have town meeting here. We have to expand it to because there was a big issue on the table.
Yes.
This is what was happening here. The folks that didn't want to be told by the state that you have to have this, they mobilized and brought. Yeah. And I think there was a lot of other people who didn't see this as worthy to even get involved.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not because it wasn't in their backyard. Right.
But again, to come back to the IM, here's a small change that we can make, right? Small change have big effects. The small change is to step back and let's understand first why we don't want this change, and then use the Mark Stiles. Well, maybe I'm wrong.
Right.
Maybe there's something here that actually is really good.
Right.
And it's okay if it benefits you as well. You are more likely than not to benefit so much from expanding our community rather than constricting
Right.
it, because we don't have a limited resource. It seems that we do based on our biological domain, but we don't. We can create space for everyone. Every friend was once a stranger. So why not? And we can explore, and I think we should. We can explore deeper what that resistance is. And, it has some pretty harsh words that are associated with it. Bias, racism, socioeconomicism, if there is such a word, where, I don't want poor people. Because I think that's what affordable housing is associated with, Mark. Am I missing something here?
No, and that's always why I tend to attempt to remove the word from the conversation.
But who qualifies for that, quote, affordable housing?
Well, the thing about it is that a lot of these developments, there's only a certain percentage of the development itself that has deemed affordable units, right? Mm-hmm. But these are your firefighters, these are your nurses, these are your school teachers, your police officers, these are your community members who don't make an excessive amount of money. I don't know what the income threshold is, but it's not poverty,
right? But you see, that's the optic that needs to be reframed, right? That affordable housing does not mean that only very poor people who somehow have already been lumped into some group, well, you must be poor because you're not contributing or whatever, you must have a disability or a drug addict, whatever the nuance is, that's not what it is about. It's about the people who we rely on, but we don't pay very much already.
Because they're passionate about what they do.
Our teachers, our firefighters, our police, the people who service us. Sadly, service is not always reimbursed at an incredible level.
Right.
So let's bring them in. But you see, I think people will go, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, in that case, yeah, my backyard's fine because they're like me. See, it gets back to that group mentality. If you're not like me, you are a potential threat.
Right.
You could devalue me. We all want to feel valued. As opposed to, we're one group. It's humanity. The vast majority of people have a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, fingers, toes, internal organs that you also have. What's the big difference? Because your skin color is different? Well, yeah, because that's a visual that I can immediately glom onto. But then step back, look again. We have an opportunity to help a lot of people.
Right.
I think this is a conversation that really we should be continuing, because I think we've come up with the beginning of some solutions, at least for our mental health and substance use community. Yeah. Let's convert some of these huge buildings into multiple treatment centers where we can house a whole bunch of people at the same time and get them the quality care that they deserve.
I love it. I love that.
Because apartment doesn't mean you need to be apart.
Right.
That's not what apartment means. We can include people in our apartments.
Yeah.
Cool. We're going to do it. What else can we solve? I think we should continue this discussion. And folks, if you're listening and you've got any questions, we have a website. Don't we? I don't know.
Do we?
I think it's me and Dr. Joe, or you can go to I don't know what it's called anymore. But there's a Facebook site, and there's
please someone help us.
The Dr. Strand,
help us get organized.
drstrand.com that you can always send in questions. We'd love to answer them. Great discussion, Mark. I'm glad we're on this.
I enjoyed it. I hope the listener is enjoying as well.
We'll continue. Chat next week.
All right. Be well, folks.
Drank from the vial. Did he do it for love, or was he just being wild?